Peter Pry, what would happen if the electrical grid were hit, and how easy is it to knock it out?
Well, if we had a protracted nationwide blackout that lasted a year, the EMP Commission assessed that we could lose up to 90% of our population through disease, societal collapse, and basically anarchy. And you know that estimate is true just from common sense if you look at what the aftermath of hurricanes is that don't last a year. For example, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, it only took, on average, when we have blackouts, it usually only takes about 24 hours after the light goes out for chaos to start reigning in the streets. The biggest problem is water and food. When you lose the electric grid, you lose running water. People can't survive for a long period of time without running water. The facilities that purify water, there tends to be backup when there's a blackout, so that human wastes, industrial wastes, backflow into lakes and rivers, which become undrinkable. They're undrinkable now, even in normal times. You run a risk of getting sick or dying from drinking from them. But if they're polluted with industrial wastes and human wastes afterwards, that would surely result in lots of human deaths. Look at Venezuela, which wasn't attacked. Socialism knocked out their electric grid for weeks, and people were drinking from the sewers. There have been many fatalities as a consequence of that sort of a thing. The nuclear reactors could go Fukushima. There's only enough emergency power and batteries and generators to run the 100 nuclear power plants that are spread across the country. In 7 days, they could go Fukushima and spread radioactivity.
When you say go Fukushima, what do you mean by that?
I'm referring to what happened in Fukushima, Japan, when they were struck by a tidal wave, and the electric grid collapsed there, and eventually the emergency generators ran out of fuel, and then they ran out of batteries to cool the nuclear reactor cores and to keep the radioactive fuel rods that are in cooling ponds cool. And the water then evaporated, and you had steam explosions that spread radioactivity in Japan. And that's the kind of a thing that could happen at 100 U.S. nuclear power plants, not just an isolated one. But I don't want to give aid and comfort to those who are anti-nuclear power. Nuclear power plants, the control systems can be hardened against EMP very easily, and it would be very easy to, if smart people were in charge of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to follow the recommendations of the EMP Commission. We could make the nuclear power plants part of the answer to national EMP preparedness. They could become islands of survivability that could bring back the big grid. And in fact, one of my colleagues, Ambassador Henry Cooper, is involved in a project to do just that with a particular nuclear reactor project that he's doing in cooperation with Duke Energy. So actually, what you said before about there is progress being made, less at the federal level, but more at the state and local levels. I think what you and I have been doing, Mark, to raise consciousness about EMP has been extremely important, because in democracies, one of the first things that has to be done is you have to educate people to the facts about what the threat is. And I think that the average American at this point probably knows as much about EMP as some of the officials and competent officials in Washington who are supposed to be working to solve the problem. I had the experience last week of being in an almost week-long blackout caused by an unusual blizzard that happened on Lake Anna in Virginia. And one of the things people started talking about on day 5 of the blackout was that, gee, they can't even protect us against a blizzard. What would happen if there was an EMP and we were faced with the prospects of a protracted, long blackout that would last months or a year? This is my neighbors. These people are not physicists or experts on EMP, but because of the information that's been out there, I think the average American's consciousness about the EMP threat has been very significantly raised. And this has resulted in positive actions at the level of states. There are a number of states, for example, heroic state legislators in Maine and Texas, in Utah, have put forward legislative initiatives to try to protect their states from EMP. And by the way, you can protect a state, the whole country. If Washington isn't going to do the job, our states should step up and do the job.
How much money would it cost to do this throughout the entire electrical grid?
The EMP Commission estimated we could protect the bulk power system for about $2 to $4 billion, all right, which is nothing compared to what they're spending on COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not a perfect solution. It would require the utilities and the federal government to engage in smart planning so that we would protect core assets and then quickly recover the grid before disaster. However, you know, for 20 or 30 billion, you could idiot-proof it so that you wouldn't need the feds or the utilities to get it right, and it would be hardened to military standards.
Here probably we have to go, idiot-proof is a tough thing, so first we have to deal with Washington, which needs to be idiot-proofed, and then we can get to the grid. I want to thank you, my friend, very, very important. You take care of yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. And if any of your listeners want to help, they could go to www.emptaskforce.us. We need volunteers to help us work on this problem.
All right. We'll be right back.